The evening air was tense, a prelude to the storm brewing in our living room. "What do you mean she's moving in tomorrow?" I asked Greg, my voice barely containing the shock and anger. Greg didn't even flinch. "It's decided, Elise. Mom's coming to live with us. It makes sense, especially now." "How can you make such a decision alone?" I countered, feeling the walls of our home closing in on me. "What about our plans, the rooms?" He had that all-knowing look, the one that always set me on edge. "We'll convert your home office. It's the only logical solution." "My office? Greg, that's my space, my sanctuary." "You don't really need it," he said dismissively. "Besides, I pay the rent here, $3,000 a month. That gives me a say in how we use the space." I was stunned. This house, the one my parents had passed down to me, now felt alien, controlled by Greg's financial hold over it. "But this is my family home," I whispered, more to myself than to him. Greg's voice was cold, devoid of the warmth I once fell in love with. "Your family home or not, I'm the one footing the bills now. Get your stuff cleared out by tomorrow." That night, I couldn't sleep. The realization that our marriage was a facade, built on the shaky grounds of financial power and silent submission, hit me hard. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my office being emptied. Marion, Greg's mother, arrived with her suitcases, an unwelcome guest in my own home. In the days that followed, the tension escalated. Marion's presence was overbearing. She rearranged the kitchen, criticized my cooking, and worst of all, she had this way of subtly belittling me in front of my daughter, Mia. I felt like a stranger, tiptoeing around my own life. Greg became more distant. His conversations were curt, his nights late. Our home, once filled with laughter and shared dreams, now echoed with the sounds of unspoken resentments and forced politeness. One evening, I overheard Greg and Marion discussing finances. "Elise doesn't contribute much anyway," Marion scoffed. "She should be grateful we're letting her stay." I felt a surge of anger. This was my family home, a place of cherished memories, now being reduced to financial transactions and power plays. The next morning, I confronted Greg. "I want to talk about the rent," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "This was my family's home. I never agreed to pay rent." Greg's response was a mix of arrogance and indifference. "Well, things change, Elise. I'm paying the bills, so technically it's more my house than yours now." That was the moment I knew. Our marriage, a delicate balance of love and compromise, had crumbled under the weight of control and disrespect. I called my father, Nolan, my voice shaking. "Dad, I need your help. It's about Greg." As I hung up, I realized that this was just the beginning. I wasn't going to let Greg and Marion turn my life into their dominion. They might have underestimated me, thinking I'd crumble under their control. But they were wrong. I was my father's daughter, and I knew a thing or two about standing my ground. Sitting in the empty room that used to be my office, I couldn't help but reminisce about the early days with Greg. We were like two pieces of a puzzle, fitting perfectly with our differences. But now, those differences were tearing us apart. I remembered our first date, how Greg's laughter had echoed in the autumn air, how he had looked at me as if I was the only person in the world. It was hard to reconcile that memory with the man who had just usurped my family home. My phone buzzed, pulling me back from the past. It was a text from my father, Nolan. "I'll take care of it. Meet me at the shop tomorrow." Nolan's auto repair shop had been a staple of my childhood. It was more than a business. It was a testament to his hard work and dedication. That shop, much like our family home, held memories of a life once filled with warmth and togetherness. The next day, I walked into the familiar scent of oil and metal. Dad was under a car, his hands expertly moving as he worked. "Dad," I called out. He slid out, wiping his hands. "Elise, let's talk in the office." The office was a small room filled with trophies from car shows and framed photos of our family. It was a capsule of happier times. "I can't believe Greg is doing this," Dad said, his eyes reflecting a mix of anger and concern. I sighed. "I know, Dad. I think it's time for some payback." Dad nodded, a determined look crossing his face. "What do you have in mind?" "I want Greg and Marion out of the house, but I want to do it legally, make them feel the pinch of their actions." Dad leaned back in his chair, pondering. "We can draw up a rental agreement, hike up the rent, make it impossible for them to stay." I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. This was the first step in reclaiming my life, but it also meant declaring war on Greg and Marion. "Let's do it," I said, the resolve in my voice surprising even me. Over the next few days, Dad and I worked on the rental agreement. It was a meticulous and strategic plan designed to legally corner Greg and Marion. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction imagining their faces when they'd see the new terms. Meanwhile, back at the house, Marion's true colors began to show more vividly. She complained about everything, from the way I dressed Mia to the brand of coffee I bought. Her words were like needles, subtle but piercing. One evening, I overheard her on the phone. "Yes, I've finally got a lease under my thumb. This house will be ours soon." Fury and disbelief coursed through me. How could she be so callous, so manipulative? But her words also steeled my resolve. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about protecting Mia from this toxic environment. The day came to present the rental agreement to Greg and Marion. I walked into the living room, the document in my hand, my heart pounding in my chest. "Greg, we need to talk about the house," I said, my voice steady. He looked up, surprised. "What about it?" I handed him the document. "It's the new rental agreement. You need to read it." As Greg's eyes scanned the pages, I saw a range of emotions flicker across his face. Confusion, disbelief, and finally anger. "This is absurd. The rent's been raised tenfold." "Yes," I said, meeting his gaze. "It's the market rate for this property. If you can't afford it, you'll have to find somewhere else to live." Greg's face turned red, his anger palpable. "You can't do this to us." "I can, and I am," I replied, feeling a sense of empowerment I hadn't felt in years. "This is my family home, Greg. You've forgotten that, but I haven't." The days following the presentation of the rental agreement were a blend of silent battles and open confrontations. Marion's true nature, once hidden under a veil of polite intrusion, now emerged in full force. One evening, I was setting the table for dinner when Marion entered the kitchen. Her eyes quickly scanned the room, landing on the simple yet nutritious meal I had prepared. "This is what you call dinner," she scoffed. "Back in my day, we knew how to provide for our families properly." I clenched my teeth, forcing a polite smile. "It's healthy, and Mia likes it." Marion snorted, dismissing my efforts with a wave of her hand. "Children don't know what's good for them. It's up to us to teach them. Clearly, you lack that understanding." Her words stung, but I remained composed. I had learned that reacting to Marion only fueled her disdain. As the days went by, Marion's presence became more oppressive. She criticized my parenting, my housekeeping, even my choice of clothes. It was as if she was deliberately trying to provoke me. One afternoon, I returned home from a quick errand to find Mia in tears and Marion sitting calmly in the living room, reading a magazine. "What happened?" I asked, rushing to comfort my daughter. "Your child is just being fussy, as usual," Marion replied without looking up. "I don't have the patience for such nonsense." I held Mia close, feeling a surge of protective anger. How could she be so cold towards her own granddaughter? Later that week, I had a meeting with a potential client for my small business. "Marion, could you please watch Mia for a couple of hours?" I asked, hoping for a bit of cooperation. Marion looked at me, her expression one of annoyance. "Fine, but make it quick. I have plans later." I returned from the meeting to find Mia once again in distress. Marion was nowhere in sight. After calming Mia down, I confronted Marion. "Where were you? I trusted you to look after her." Marion rolled her eyes. "I had to step out for a bit. She was sleeping, anyway. What's the big deal?" The big deal was that Marion's selfishness was now affecting Mia, my most precious treasure. I realized then that Marion would never change. Her contempt for me had spilled over to Mia, and I wouldn't tolerate it any longer. I called my father that night, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and determination. "Dad, it's getting worse. She's not just targeting me now. She's neglecting Mia." Nolan's response was swift and resolute. "We need to speed up our plan. It's not safe for you and Mia there anymore." The following day I saw Greg and Marion whispering in the living room, their heads close together in conspiracy. "What are you two plotting now?" I asked, a hard edge to my voice. Greg looked up, his expression one of feigned innocence. "Just discussing some financial matters. Nothing for you to worry about." But I knew better. The rental agreement had unsettled them, and now they were scrambling. I could almost smell their desperation, a scent that, under different circumstances, might have been satisfying. Instead, I felt a cold resolve settling in my heart. They had underestimated me, thinking I would crumble under their pressure. But they were wrong. I was ready to fight back, not just for myself, but for Mia. The battle lines were drawn, and I was no longer just a passive player in their game of control. I was about to change the rules entirely. Every day in the house felt like walking on a tightrope. Marian's presence loomed large, a constant source of negativity. Her comments were like thorns, pricking away at my patience and resolve. One evening, as I put Mia to bed, I overheard Marian speaking to Greg in hushed tones in the living room. "Elise is not fit to be a mother. She's too soft, too indecisive. You need someone who can actually run a household efficiently." I stood frozen, listening to their conversation. Greg's reply was a weak agreement, a betrayal that cut deeper than any of Marian's sharp words. The next day, I confronted Greg. "Do you really think I'm a bad mother?" I asked, my voice shaking. Greg avoided my gaze. "It's not just about being a mother, Elise. It's about being responsible, about being adequate." Adequate. The word echoed in my mind, a stinging indictment of my role in this family. As the days passed, Marian's manipulations grew bolder. She rearranged the furniture to her liking, disposed of items she deemed unnecessary, and took over the kitchen, effectively pushing me to the margins of my own home. One day I came home to find Mia crying inconsolably. Marian was in the kitchen, completely ignoring her. "Why aren't you attending to her?" I demanded, my heart racing with worry. Marian shrugged, a cold detachment in her eyes. "She needs to learn to soothe herself. It's part of growing up." That night I called my father, my voice a mix of anger and desperation. "I can't do this anymore, Dad. Greg and Marian are destroying everything I hold dear. I need to get out." Nolan's response was immediate and firm. "You and Mia come stay with me. We'll sort this out." I hesitated. Leaving the house meant giving up the fight, but staying meant subjecting Mia and myself to more torment. The decision crystallized the next morning when I found my personal belongings boxed up in the garage. Marian had decided they were cluttering the house. That act of violation was the final straw. I packed our essentials, taking one last look at the home that had once been a haven of love and happiness. As I closed the door behind me, a sense of relief washed over me. I was leaving behind the oppressive walls of that house, but I was also stepping into the unknown. Staying with my father brought a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. Mia's laughter returned, filling the house with joy. But the battle was far from over. I met with my lawyer to discuss the divorce. "I want full custody of Mia," I stated firmly, "and I want the house back." The lawyer nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "We'll build a strong case. You have rights, Elise." As the legal proceedings began, I realized this was more than just a divorce. It was a fight for my identity, for my daughter's future, and for justice against the tyranny of Greg and Marian. Greg's reaction to the divorce papers was a mix of shock and anger. "You're making a mistake, Elise. You won't win this." But I was resolute. I had tolerated, endured, and sacrificed enough. It was time to reclaim my life and protect my daughter from the toxic environment Greg and Marian had created. I was no longer the passive, accommodating Elise. I was a mother, a fighter, and I was ready to take back control. The divorce proceedings were a cold, calculated dance of legal maneuvers and emotional confrontations. Greg's shock at my decision to leave quickly turned into a bitter determination to fight back. I sat in the lawyer's office, reviewing the documents. "He's contesting the custody of Mia," I said, my voice laced with disbelief. The lawyer nodded solemnly. "He's also challenging your claim to the house. But we have a strong case, Elise." As the legal battle ensued, my resolve hardened. This was no longer just about leaving a failed marriage. It was about standing up against the injustice and manipulation I had endured. In the midst of this, my father and I finalized our plan for the rental agreement. It was a strategic move designed to legally compel Greg and Marian to vacate my family home. One afternoon, I arrived at the house to deliver the new rental terms. Greg and Marian were waiting, their expressions a mix of defiance and curiosity. I handed Greg the document, watching his face as he read through it. His eyes widened in disbelief. "This is ridiculous. You're increasing the rent to an exorbitant amount." "Yes, Greg," I replied calmly. "That's the market rate for a property of this size and location." Marian interjected, her voice shrill with panic. "You can't do this to us, Elise. This is our home." "No, Marian," I countered, standing my ground. "This is my family home. You and Greg have made it clear that I'm not welcome here. So if you wish to stay, these are the new terms." Greg slammed the document on the table, his anger palpable. "We'll fight this. You won't get away with it." But behind his words, I sensed his fear. The realization that they were losing control was dawning on them. As I left the house, a bittersweet feeling enveloped me. I had taken a significant step in reclaiming my home, but the sight of Mia's abandoned toys in the living room reminded me of the personal cost of this battle. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal appointments and emotional upheaval. I clung to Mia, her innocence and love, my anchors in the storm. During one of the hearings, Greg's true colors came to the forefront. "Elise is unstable, Your Honor," he claimed. "She's not fit to be a sole custodian." I listened, my heart pounding, as my lawyer countered his baseless accusations, with evidence of my stable income and loving relationship with Mia. In a subsequent meeting, Greg's lawyer proposed a settlement. Greg is willing to relinquish his claim to the house in exchange for joint custody and a reduction in the rent. I hesitated, torn between the desire to end this battle and the need to protect Mia from Greg and Marian's toxic influence. But then I remembered Mia's tears, Marian's callousness, and Greg's betrayal. This was no longer just about winning a legal battle. It was about justice and setting an example for my daughter. "I refuse," I said firmly. "I will not compromise on Mia's well-being or my family home." The decision to continue the fight was a difficult one, but it was necessary. I was no longer the woman who tolerated disrespect and manipulation. I was fighting for my rights, for my daughter's future, and for the dignity that Greg and Marian had tried to strip away from me. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready for whatever came next. The day of the final confrontation arrived like a storm on the horizon. Armed with the legal documents, I stood at the doorstep of what used to be my sanctuary, now a battleground. Greg opened the door, his face a mask of defiance. Marian hovered behind him, her eyes betraying her anxiety. "What do you want, Elise?" Greg asked, his tone icy. "I'm here to finalize the arrangements," I said, handing him the updated rental agreement. As he read, his expression shifted from confidence to disbelief. "This is absurd. You're demanding a rent that's beyond unreasonable." "It's the market rate for a property of this size in this location," I replied, my voice steady. "If you can't afford it, you'll have to vacate." Marian stepped forward, her voice trembling. "You can't do this to us. We have nowhere else to go." "That was your choice when you decided to push me out of my own home," I said, meeting her gaze. Greg slammed the document on the table. "We'll see what the court has to say about this. You're not going to get away with trying to evict us from our home." "This ceased being your home when you chose to disregard my rights and my feelings," I retorted. The air was thick with tension, the once familiar living room feeling like a foreign land. I looked around, memories flooding back, of laughter, of love, of a life that once was. Now it was just a shell, housing bitterness and betrayal. As I turned to leave, Marian's voice stopped me. "Elise, please. We can negotiate. There must be a way to resolve this." I paused, considering her words. Then, with a resolve that surprised even me, I said, "There's nothing left to negotiate. You made your decision when you chose to side with Greg against me and Mia." With that, I walked out of the house, leaving behind the echoes of a life that no longer existed. The days that followed were a mix of relief and uncertainty. The legal proceedings were grueling, but my resolve never wavered. I was fighting for my dignity, for my daughter, for the justice that had been denied to me. Eventually, the court ruled in my favor. Greg and Marian were given a month to vacate the property. The news hit them like a tidal wave, washing away the last vestiges of their control and arrogance. I watched from a distance as they moved out, their belongings a testament to their shattered dreams and misplaced ambitions. In their eyes, I saw the realization of their defeat, the understanding that their manipulations had backfired. As I stepped back into my family home, now empty of their presence, a sense of peace enveloped me. It was not the peace of victory, but the peace of justice served. I walked through each room, reclaiming the space that had once been ours, mine and Mia's. The walls that had witnessed so much pain now stood as silent sentinels to a new beginning. I knew the road ahead would be challenging. There would be wounds to heal, memories to reconcile. But for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of hope. I had fought against the odds, stood up to the tyranny of Greg and Marion, and emerged stronger. This was more than just a legal victory. It was a reclaiming of my life, a testament to the strength I never knew I had. The dust had settled, the legal battles were over, and the once turbulent house was now calm. As I stood in the empty living room, the memories of what had transpired echoed in the silence. Mia played in the corner, her laughter a balm to my weary heart. Watching her, I realized that this struggle, though fraught with pain, was necessary. It wasn't just a fight for a house. It was a battle for our future, for our peace. The day Greg and Marion left, I saw a glimpse of realization in their eyes, a dawning understanding of the consequences of their actions. Marion looked back at the house, her expression one of loss and regret. Greg, defeated and subdued, didn't meet my gaze. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I returned to my small business, finding solace in the familiar routine and the support of my regular customers. Mia thrived in the newfound stability, her resilience, a testament to the strength of our bond. One afternoon, as I was closing the shop, a familiar face appeared at the door. It was Greg. He looked different. The arrogance had left his eyes, replaced by a certain humility. "Elise," he began awkwardly, "I wanted to apologize for everything." I listened, a mix of surprise and skepticism. "Why now, Greg?" He sighed, a deep, weary sound. Losing the house, the divorce, it made me realize how wrong I was, how much I lost because of my pride and my mother's influence. I considered his words, the years of pain and struggle flashing through my mind. "Your apology doesn't change what happened, Greg. But I accept it, for Mia's sake." Greg nodded, a look of relief passing over his face. "Thank you, Elise, and I'm sorry, truly." As he walked away, I felt a chapter of my life closing. Greg's apology didn't erase the past, but it offered a closure, a finality to the turmoil we had endured. In the months that followed, I renovated the house, turning it into a home once again. The walls were repainted, the rooms refurnished, and new memories were made. It was a sanctuary for Mia and me, a place of healing and growth. I often sat on the porch, watching Mia play in the yard, reflecting on our journey. The challenges had been immense, but they had also revealed a strength I never knew I possessed. I had stood up against injustice, fought for my rights, and reclaimed my life from those who sought to control it. It was a journey of self-discovery, of learning to trust in my own strength and resilience. In the end, this was more than just a story of revenge. It was a tale of empowerment, of rising above the trials and tribulations to forge a better future for myself and my daughter. The house, once a battleground of conflict and manipulation, was now a haven of peace and hope. It was a reminder that sometimes the hardest battles lead to the most rewarding victories. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the yard, I held Mia close, grateful for the journey that had brought us here. We had overcome, we had triumphed, and we were finally home.
"So now you decide to show up?" Her voice was cold, nothing like the warm tones that had comforted me throughout my childhood. "Grandma, what's going on? They told me you were in a nursing home." The words tumbled out as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Doichi held up her hand, and the gesture felt like a physical blow. "Your grandfather called you over and over. He was asking for you on his deathbed, wanting to say goodbye to his little scientist. But you couldn't be bothered to answer his calls or visit him. How could you be so cruel?" "Nellie, let me see the number he was calling," I said, my voice barely steady. "Please, Grandma, I need to understand." Grandma disappeared inside for a moment and returned with a small notepad. Her hands were shaking as she showed me the number scribbled in Grandpa's familiar handwriting. That's not my number," I whispered, staring at the unfamiliar digits. "I've had the same number since high school. They gave you a fake number." "What do you mean, fake number?" Grandma's stern expression began to crack. "Your parents said you changed it when you went to university. They said you wanted to distance yourself from us." The pieces were starting to fall into place. Grandma, I came here during break. Emma was here. She wouldn't let me in. She said no one was home. Then Mom and Dad told me you and Grandpa were in a nursing home. Grandma's face went pale. Nursing home? We never. Emma and your parents told us you were too busy with your new university life to visit. They said, her voice cracked. They said you were ashamed of us, that we weren't sophisticated enough for you anymore. They said what? My niece felt weak. How could they? Grandma, they told me the funeral was at 2:00 p.m. today. When I got to the church, it was already over. They said I mixed up the times, but I didn't. I would never. The funeral was at 10:00 a.m. Grandma said slowly, realization dawning in her eyes. Your parents stood there and told everyone how ashamed they were that you couldn't even be bothered to come to your own grandfather's funeral. Emma was crying about how she tried so hard to reach you. I fell into her arms, then both of us dissolving into tears on the front porch. All the pain, all the confusion, all the manufactured distance between us poured out as we held each other. He died thinking I abandoned him. I sobbed into her shoulder. Grandpa died thinking I didn't care. Grandma stroked my hair like she used to when I was little, her own tears falling. We know the truth now. We know. After we dried our tears, Grandma picked up the phone with a determined look on her face. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Linda, yes, it's me. I need you, Robert, and Emma to come over right away. There are some important documents we need to discuss. No, it can't wait. Wait. They'll be here in an hour, Grandma said, hanging up the phone. I told them I had important documents to discuss. The lawyer is on his way too. When the doorbell rang, Grandma squeezed my hand. Stay in the kitchen until I call you. I heard them enter, Mom's practiced social laugh, Dad's formal greetings, Emma's bored sigh. Then Grandma's voice, unusually sharp. Please, everyone, take a seat. Mr. Harrison is here to read George's will. That was my cue. I stepped into the living room just as the lawyer was opening his briefcase. The looks on their faces were unforgettable. Mom's perfect smile frozen in place, Dad's face draining of color, Emma's mouth hanging open in shock. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and began reading. I, George Walker, being of sound mind, declare this to be my last will and testament. The room was silent except for the rustle of papers. First came the house, left to Grandma along with a substantial sum for her ongoing care and maintenance. Then came the surprise that made Emma's face turn red with anger. To my granddaughter, Nellie Walker, I leave my newly constructed laboratory facility at 1420 Pine Street, fully equipped and ready for her research work. All necessary permits and paperwork have been processed and finalized. I couldn't believe my ears. Grandpa had built me a lab, my own research facility. The remainder of my estate, Mr. Harrison continued, is to be divided equally between my granddaughters, Nellie and Emma Walker. Emma's chair scraped against the floor as she stood up abruptly, but Grandma raised her hand. There's more, she said, pulling out a letter. Your grandfather wanted this read as well. Where should we put this one? Grandpa would ask each time I brought home a new trophy or diploma. In the box with the others, I'd say, pulling out my special cardboard box from under the bed. I never displayed my awards, partly because I didn't want to seem boastful, but mostly because I knew they made my parents uncomfortable. Emma, of course, had her own take on my success. Nobody likes a know-it-all. She'd sneer, but then turn around and say, hey, can you help me with my science homework, and maybe just do it for me? Emma, that's cheating, I protested. Nellie, help your sister right now, Mom would inevitably command. family helps family. So I'd end up doing Emma's work, feeling like a fraud, but too afraid to stand up to my parents. It became a pattern. Emma would demand, my parents would insist, and I would comply. I often overheard my parents talking about me when they thought I wasn't listening. Their whispered conversations floated up the stairs to my room, where I'd sit with my chemistry set or the latest research paper I was studying. "I just don't understand where she gets it from," Mom would say. "No one in our family is like this." "Maybe she was switched at birth," Dad would joke, but the undertone of seriousness in his voice hurt more than if he'd meant it as a pure jest. One evening, after I won another science competition, I heard Dad's voice from his study. He was talking to Emma about her struggling grades. "It's not fair that she's so smart," Emma whined. "Listen, sweetheart," Dad's voice softened. "We need to focus on you, Nellie. Well, she'll be fine on her own." I pressed my back against the wall, fighting back tears. They thought they were justifying their neglect with twisted logic, as if being capable somehow meant I didn't need love or support. At school, I was that weird girl who spent lunch breaks in the laboratory instead of the cafeteria. Sure, people would come to me for help with their science homework, but real friendships, those were rare. Grandma and Grandpa were my rocks. They'd listen for hours as I explained my latest experiments or theories. They never made me feel like I was too much or too different. "Look what I found for you," Grandpa would say, pulling out scientific journals or new equipment for my experiments. "I thought this might interest you." But despite having my grandparents' support, the hole in my heart where my parents' love should have been felt vast and empty. I'd watch other families at school events, parents proudly hugging their kids, siblings supporting each other, and feel a deep ache in my chest. Then came the news that would change everything. I was graduating early. At 16, I'd completed all my high school requirements and had been offered a full scholarship to one of the top universities in the country. The day I left for university felt like breathing fresh air for the first time. The campus was buzzing with energy, and for once, I wasn't the odd one out in my advanced chemistry class. I met Sarah and Michael, who got just as excited about molecular structures as I did. For the first time in my life, I had friends who understood me. We'd spend hours in the lab, bouncing ideas off each other, getting excited about discoveries that would make most people's eyes glaze over. But even as I thrived in my new environment, a part of me still yearned for my family's approval. I'd call home weekly, hoping for more than the brief, disinterested conversations I usually got. "Yes, Nellie, that's nice," Mom would say when I tried to tell her about my research. "Oh, did you hear about Emma's new job? She's working at that fancy boutique downtown." I didn't know it then, but my time at university was the calm before the storm. It happened during one of my routine calls home. I was in the middle of my second semester, deep into my research project, when Mom's voice caught my attention. "And with your father's condition getting worse," she was saying to Dad, probably thinking I was on mute. "What about Grandpa?" I interrupted, my heart suddenly racing. "Mom, what's wrong with him?" There was a pause too long to be innocent. "Oh, Nellie, I didn't realize you were still there. It's nothing serious, just a minor health issue. He's already recovering." "I'm coming home," I said immediately, already mentally calculating the fastest route. "I can be there by tomorrow morning." No, don't be ridiculous." Mom's voice turned sharp. "You need to focus on your studies. Emma is helping them out. Everything's under control." Something felt off about her tone, but I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. Still, I called Grandma right after. "Oh yes, dear," Grandma said, her voice oddly distant. "Emma's been such a help. She comes by often to check on your grandfather." Emma, the same sister who used to say visiting our grandparents was boring. something wasn't adding up. 2 weeks later, I stood at my grandparents' familiar front door, my heart pounding with anticipation. But instead of Grandma's warm welcome, I found Emma blocking the doorway. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her face a mask of fake surprise. "I came to see Grandpa and Grandma." "How is he?" "No one's home," she said quickly, too quickly. "They're out." "Grandpa's sick. Where would they go?" "I don't know, Nellie, just go away." She started to close the door. "Wait," I put my foot in the doorway. "Let me come in and wait for them." "No one's home." She shoved the door hard against my foot. "God, you're so annoying. Just leave." Confused and hurt, I tried calling Grandma, straight to voicemail. This wasn't like her at all. She always kept her phone on for me. With nowhere else to go, I headed to my parents' house, hoping for answers. Mom and Dad were in the kitchen when I arrived. "Red, what are you doing home?" Dad asked, not even trying to hide his annoyance. "I came to see Grandpa and Grandma, but they're not home. Emma wouldn't let me in." "Oh, honey," Mom interrupted, exchanging a look with Dad. "We were going to tell you. Your grandparents are in a nursing home." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "What? Why didn't anyone tell me?" "It was a quick decision," Dad said smoothly. "They needed specialized care. It's better this way." "Which nursing home?" "I want to visit them." "They're under quarantine right now," Mom said quickly. "No visitors allowed. Maybe next time." Eventually, I did go back to university, but something felt terribly wrong. I tried to focus on my lab work, but my mind kept circling back to that afternoon at their door, to Emma's hostile face, to my parents' too smooth explanations. That terrible call came on a Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of an experiment when my phone lit up with Mom's number. The fluorescent lights of the university lab hummed above me as my heart started racing. Something about the timing of this call felt ominous. "Nellie," she said, her voice oddly flat, "your grandfather passed away last night." The test tube I was holding slipped from my fingers and shattered on the floor. The sound echoed through the EMP lab like a gunshot. "What?" "No. When's the funeral?" My voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "Thursday at 2 p.m., don't be late." The way she said it felt strange, almost rehearsed. I didn't even bother cleaning up the broken glass. I rushed out of the lab, my mind spinning with grief and confusion. My beloved grandfather was gone, no chance to say goodbye, no final words of wisdom from the man who had believed in me my whole life. I took the first flight I could get, spending the entire journey trying to hold back tears as memories of him flooded my mind. At 1:30 p.m., I made my way to the church. The empty parking lot was my first clue that something was terribly wrong. My footsteps echoed in the silent building as I approached the entrance, dread building with each step. Inside, a custodian was methodically cleaning the floors. "The Walker funeral?" I asked when I inquired, looking up from his work. "That ended hours ago. They held it at 10:00 a.m. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The world started spinning around me as I grabbed onto a nearby pew for support. Frantically, I pulled out my phone and called my parents. "Oh, Nellie," Mom's voice dripped with disappointment. "You must have mixed up the times. We clearly said 10:00 a.m. "No," I said firmly, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. "You said 2:00 p.m. I wrote it down." "I know you said 2:00 p.m. Where's Grandma?" "I need to talk to her." "Your grandmother is still in the nursing home. Dad cut in, and she doesn't want to see you right now. She's very upset you missed the funeral." I told my parents I was heading back to university, but my feet had other plans. I found myself driving to my grandparents' house, desperate for answers, for some kind of explanation that would make sense of this nightmare. The familiar street looked exactly the same. The old oak tree, the carefully tended garden, the wind chimes Grandma loved so much. My hands were trembling as I rang the doorbell. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened and there stood Grandma, the same Grandma who was supposedly in a nursing home, refusing to see me. "Grandma," I moved to hug her, relief flooding through me at the sight of her familiar face. But she stepped back, and the look in her eyes stopped me cold. Her face was hard and unfamiliar, like she was looking at a stranger instead of her granddaughter. Since I can remember, I have been captivated by the world around me in ways that appear to be confusing my family. My name is Nellie. I gathered leaves, rocks, and anything else I could look at with the small magnifying lens I had taken from a cereal box, while my sister Emma played with dolls and dreamed of being a princess. "Mom, why do leaves change color in fall?" I would inquire, displaying a maple leaf I had discovered that was really colorful. "Ask Nellie, your teacher." Emma would respond, without looking at me. "I'm busy helping Emma with her dance costume." This was a typical answer to my never-ending barrage of inquiries concerning science and environment. One afternoon when I was 7 years old, I recall sitting at our kitchen table with a variety of household objects arranged in front of me. Fascinated by the effects, I had started combining baking soda with various liquids. "What in heaven's name are you doing?" My focus was broken by Mom's words. "Observe this mess. Now clean this up. I need the kitchen cleaned since your sister's friends are coming over for her birthday celebration." Emma's birthday celebrations, with dozens of visitors, life-sized cartoon characters, and entertainment, they were always lavish events. In contrast, mine were small gatherings with only my grandparents and a plain cake. There was no more striking contrast. With another copy of the scientific encyclopedia in hand, Dad would remark, "Here's your birthday present, sweetheart." Please understand that I adored those novels. However, it became evident where our parents' true focus was as we saw Emma open her mountain of toys and technology at her celebrations. I'm grateful for my dad's parents, my grandparents. They served as a haven for me, a way to forget about being the odd one out in our family. They would throw wide their arms to me every weekend and school vacation. Grandpa would remark, "Tell me more about what you've learned this week, little scientist," as I reeled off my most recent findings, his eyes sparkling with real excitement. I never took Emma to our grandparents' house. She would gripe, "They're so boring. Besides, Mom and Dad are taking me to the new theme park this weekend." I would attempt to ignore the pain in my chest as I watched them drive away from the window. Why can't I go too? I did ask once. "Oh, honey," Mom replied, absently rubbing my head. "It wouldn't be fun for you. Rather of enjoying yourself, you would most likely want to learn how the rides work." That's the way it was. I was the one who didn't quite fit in, who asked too many questions, who liked microscopes more than makeup, and Emma was the typical one, the one who matched their ideal of what a daughter should be. When I began middle school, everything changed. The first person outside of my grandparents who appeared to really see me was my science teacher, Mrs. Peterson. "Mr. and Mrs. Walker, your daughter has extraordinary potential," she said my parents at a session between the instructor and parents. Even though I was seated outside the classroom, I could still hear everything. I've never witnessed a pupil so naturally understand difficult scientific ideas. We must talk about moving Nellie to our talented program. Gifted program. I recognized the contemptuous tone in Mom's voice all too well. That sounds like a lot of work. Where she is doing well. In addition, we must take Emma into account. Nellie shouldn't be given preferential treatment. My heart was sinking as I sat there. They would say no, of course. They never said yes to me. Then Grandma learned about it, though. She entered my school like a commander advancing on battle the following day. She stood in the principal's office and spoke in a hard, uncompromising voice that I will never forget. My granddaughter will take those exams and be given all the chances she is due. What her parents said doesn't matter to me. As the principal put it, but Mrs. Walker, we need parental consent. My son and his wife will be under my care. Just make sure Nellie has an opportunity. And she managed to do it somehow. My parents ultimately consented to let me take the placement tests after a week of heated debates, and I believe some financial pressure from my grandparents. I excelled in every one of them. Suddenly, my world expanded. The gifted program opened doors I never knew existed. International science competitions, academic Olympiads, research seminars. I threw myself into all of it. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who thought like me, who got excited about the same things I did. I won my first international competition with a project about sustainable ecosystems, then another and another. My dear family, Grandma began reading, her voice strong and clear. I've watched over the years as favoritism has poisoned our family. To my son and daughter-in-law, your treatment of your daughters has been shameful. Each child deserves equal love, equal support. Stop, Emma screamed, jumping to her feet. This is ridiculous. Why should she get anything? Do you know what I had to do? All those hours sitting with that boring old man, pretending to care. Mom tried to shush her, but Emma was beyond control. You promised. She turned on our parents. You said if I played nice, if I visited him and acted like the perfect granddaughter, everything would be mine. You made me grovel to a dying man. The raw truth of their manipulation was finally exposed in all its ugliness. And now what? Emma continued, her voice getting shriller. Little Miss Perfect gets a whole laboratory, and I only get half the money. No, give me the house. She doesn't need both. She can have her precious lab. I sat there in silence, watching my sister's true colors emerge in all their violent shades. The perfect daughter act had finally cracked, revealing the ugly reality beneath. Well, Mom broke the tense silence. Nellie, you heard your sister. Be reasonable. Do you know how much we've invested in your education? All those science camps, competitions. I almost laughed. You didn't pay for any of that. Grandma and Grandpa did. That's not the point. Mom cut in sharply. Family means sacrifice. If you want to honor your grandfather's memory, you'll sign over your share to Emma. She needs it more than you do. Honor his memory. Grandma's voice cut through the room like a whip. She stood up, Grandpa's letter still in her hands. Let me remind you exactly what George had to say about this family's idea of sacrifice. She began reading again. To my son and his wife. Your blatant favoritism has created a poison in this family. Your treatment of Nellie has been nothing short of emotional abuse. Well, you've turned Emma into an entitled spoiled. How dare you? Emma shrieked. No. How dare you? I had never heard Grandma's voice thunder with such ferocity. To a dying man, you all deceived and missold him. You have the gall to preach about sacrifice in family after preventing his cherished grandchild from saying goodbye to him. She approached the door and threw it open. Leave. You, everyone. I'm also sad that George left you anything at all. Emma. All you are is a pampered, self-centered daughter who inherited her behavior from her pampered, self-centered parents. With slamming doors and threats, they departed. In their aftermath, the home was strangely silent. 5 years have passed since then. Grandpa constructed a research facility for me, which I now operate. It's more than I could have ever imagined. I swear that I can occasionally sense his presence, proud and loving as ever when I'm working late at night. Grandma comes around a lot. She enjoys asking questions about my most recent work when touring the lab over our Sunday supper together. She claims that taking scientific classes at the nearby community college has improved her understanding of my job. However, I believe she simply wishes to have the same enthusiasm for learning that Grandpa and I always had. Since that day, I haven't spoken to Emma or my parents. I occasionally see their numbers on my phone or their names in my email inbox, but I delete them without viewing them. I've made my decision, and they made theirs a long time ago. I discovered an old picture of Grandpa in one of his books the other day. A much younger me was looking through a magnifying lens in his yard as he pointed out something. His writing on the back said, "My little scientist will change the world someday." I now keep the picture on my desk. I've discovered that not all families are related by blood. Sometimes the people who believe in you, encourage your goals, and love you because of your differences, rather than in spite of them, are the real family.
I stared at Adam's phone, my fingers hovering over the screen. The text from his mother glowed accusingly. "Found the perfect property, darling. 4 bedrooms upstairs for us, plus that mother-in-law suite we discussed. Lauren will come around once she sees it." My name is Lauren, and I wasn't going to come around to anything. The living room suddenly felt too small, the walls of our apartment closing in like a trap. 3 years of marriage, and somehow I'd missed the signs that my mother-in-law was plotting to merge our households into some twisted multi-generational nightmare. "Hey, babe," Adam's voice drifted from the kitchen. "Have you seen my phone?" I took a screenshot and sent it to myself before placing his phone back on the coffee table. "It's out here." He appeared in the doorway, dish towel in hand, wearing that easy smile that usually made my heart skip. Now it just made my stomach turn. "Thanks. Mom's been trying to reach me about something." "Oh? Anything interesting?" He grabbed his phone, scrolling through messages. I watched his face, waiting for any flicker of guilt or hesitation. Nothing. Just that same pleasant mask he wore whenever he was about to lie to me. Just some real estate stuff she's looking into. Actually. He sat down beside me, close enough that our thighs touched. "I've been meaning to talk to you about that. Mom's thinking about downsizing." "Downsizing into our lives, you mean?" His smile faltered. "It's not like that. She's just floating ideas about pooling our resources. Think about it. We could afford a much nicer place if we combined households." I stood up, needing distance. "When exactly were you planning to consult me about this life-changing decision?" "Lauren, come on. It's just an idea at this stage. An idea you and your mother have clearly been discussing for a while." I pulled out my phone, pulled up the screenshot, and held it in front of his face. "Mother-in-law's suite you discussed. When exactly did that discussion happen, Adam?" Colour drained from his face. "You went through my phone. Don't you dare make this about privacy when you've been planning to ambush me with your mother as a permanent house guest." He ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit I used to find endearing. "It's not an ambush. Mom's lonely since Dad died, and she's not getting any younger. We have to think about the future." "Our future or her future?" "They're connected, Lauren. She's family." I laughed, but there was no humour in it. "Funny how family only matters when it's your side of it. Remember when my dad offered you that position at his company? You turned it down because you didn't want to seem dependent on my family. But moving in with your mother? That's totally different, right?" "That's not fair." "No, what's not fair is you and Evelyn making plans behind my back. What's not fair is you knowing exactly how I'd feel about this and trying to manipulate me into it anyway." My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah asking if we were still on for coffee tomorrow. Perfect timing. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't drowning in the Kool-Aid of Evelyn's manipulation. "I'm going out," I announced, grabbing my keys. "Lauren, wait. We need to talk about this." "No. What you need to do is decide whether you're my husband or your mother's son, because right now you're failing spectacularly at being both." I slammed the door behind me, my hands shaking as I pressed the elevator button. 3 years of marriage. And I'd just discovered I was in a three-way relationship with my husband and his mother. As the elevator descended, I pulled out my phone and texted Sarah. "Coffee tomorrow isn't going to cut it. Wine tonight, emergency." Her response was immediate. Doors open, bottles ready. At least someone in my life had their priorities straight. Sarah's wine-fueled advice from last night still echoed in my head when the doorbell rang at 9 a.m. Through the peephole, I saw Evelyn's perfectly coiffed silver hair and practiced smile. Of course she'd show up unannounced. Of course she'd ignore the 3 unanswered calls from last night. I opened the door, channeling every ounce of corporate politeness I'd learned from my father. Evelyn. What a surprise. "Lauren, darling," she breezed past me, designer handbags swinging, her perfume leaving a suffocating trail. "I brought those property listings I mentioned to Adam. Where is my boy?" "At work, where I should be in 30 minutes. She settled onto our couch like she was auditioning for a throne. "Perfect timing, then. We can have a little girl talk." Her eyes swept the living room, lingering on the wine glasses Sarah and I had left out. "Though perhaps you should have some coffee first. You look tired." I remained standing. "I appreciate you stopping by, but Adam and I haven't finished discussing the housing situation." "Oh, but that's why I'm here." She pulled out a thick folder. "I've done all the research for you both. This way you don't have to worry your pretty head about the details." The condescension in her voice made my teeth ache. "Actually, I do need to worry about the details. It's my life we're talking about." "Our lives, dear. Family means thinking beyond ourselves." She patted the couch beside her. "Come, sit. Let me show you this gorgeous property in Cedar Hills. The mother-in-law suite has its own entrance, so you'll barely know I'm there." I checked my watch. I really need to get ready for work. "Still climbing that corporate ladder?" She clicked her tongue. "You know, Adam mentions how much he misses home-cooked meals. If we lived together, I could teach you some of his favourites. He practically lived on my pot roast in college." "Adam's a grown man who can cook his own meals." I moved toward the door, making my exit strategy clear. "And I'm a grown woman who can make her own housing decisions." She stood, clutching her folder like a shield. "Lauren, dear, I know you think you're protecting your independence, but marriage is about compromise, about family." Funny, I thought marriage was about partnership and respect. The door opened behind me, and Adam walked in, still in his running clothes. His eyes darted between us, that familiar conflict avoidance expression settling on his face. "Mom? What are you doing here?" "Showing Lauren those properties we discussed." She moved to hug him, shooting me a triumphant look over his shoulder. "The one in Cedar Hills is perfect, darling, just like we talked about." I watched my husband's face, waiting for him to correct her, to mention our argument, to show any sign of backbone. Instead, he smiled weakly. "Mom, maybe now isn't the best time." "Nonsense. Lauren and I were having a lovely chat." She turned to me. "Weren't we, dear?" The lie sat there, daring me to challenge it. I grabbed my work bag instead. "I'm late for a meeting. Adam, we'll talk later." "Lauren," he started, but I was already out the door. In the elevator, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "How's the morning after? Ready to set boundaries?" I typed back, "Too late. Hurricane Evelyn just made landfall, with property listings." Sarah's response was immediate. "That witch moves fast. Want me to accidentally spill coffee on her at that cafe she likes?" Despite everything, I smiled. Then another text came through, this one from my father. "Monthly review meeting moved to 10 a.m. Bring the Thompson account numbers." I stared at my father's message, an idea forming. Adam had turned down that job offer because he didn't want to seem dependent on my family. But maybe it was time to use every advantage I had. After all, Evelyn wasn't the only one who could play the long game. I texted back, "See you at 10. And Dad, can we talk after? I need your advice on something." Two could play at this game of family loyalty. And unlike Evelyn, I actually had something worth offering, besides pot roast recipes and guilt trips. The realtor's business card fell from Adam's jacket pocket while I was doing laundry. Monica Chen, Cedar Hills Luxury Properties. 3 missed calls from her number lit up his phone when I checked. My hands trembled as I pulled up his calendar. Every Tuesday lunch hour for the past month, blocked off as client meetings. I'd married a liar. The front door clicked open. I stayed in the laundry room, listening to Adam's footsteps, the rustle of his briefcase hitting the counter, the familiar rhythm of his after-work routine. Everything so normal. Everything a lie. "Lauren," he called out. "You home?" I stepped into the kitchen, Monica Chen's card between my fingers. "How's Monica?" His face went blank, then shifted through confusion, recognition, and finally settled on guilt. "I can explain." "Please do. Explain why you've been house hunting with your mother behind my back." "It's not like that. Mom asked me to look at a few properties." "For a month? Every Tuesday?" He loosened his tie, buying time. "I was going to tell you once we found the right place. Something you'd love." "Something I'd love?" The laugh that escaped me didn't sound like my voice at all. "You mean something that would make it harder for me to say no? Were you planning to ambush me with a perfect house, hoping I'd be too impressed to remember I never wanted this in the first place? Lauren, please, did Monica show you that mother-in-law suite Evelyn's so excited about? The one with its own entrance so I'll barely know she's there?" His eyes widened. "You talked to my mother about this?" "Oh, you mean during her surprise visit this morning? The one where she brought property listings and criticized my cooking?" "Yeah, we had a lovely chat about your favorite pot roast." Adam slumped against the counter. "I'm trying to make everyone happy here." "Everyone except me." I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the photos I'd taken earlier. "Want to see what I found today? The mortgage pre-approval letter in your email, the floor plans you and Evelyn have been discussing, the furniture catalogue with your mother's notes about what would look good in our new living room." Each revelation hit him like a physical blow. "You went through my email? Funny how that bothers you more than lying to your wife for a month." "I wasn't lying, I was—" He ran his hands through his hair. "Mom's lonely. She's not getting younger. She needs us. No, she needs control. And you're giving it to her at the expense of our marriage. That's not fair." "Fair?" I slapped the realtor's card on the counter. "You know what's not fair? Planning a future that affects my life without including me in the discussion. Making decisions about our marriage with your mother instead of your wife. Lying to my face every Tuesday while you played house with Monica Chen." His phone buzzed, Evelyn's face lighting up the screen. "Of course. Go ahead," I said. "Answer it. Tell her how unreasonable I'm being. Tell her how I snooped through your things and ruined the surprise. I'm sure she'll have plenty to say about that." "Lauren, stop. Let's just talk about this. We're past talking. We're at the point where you need to choose. Are you my husband or her son? Because right now, you're failing at both." I grabbed my keys and bag, already dialing Sarah's number as I headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Adam called after me. "To look at apartments, ones without mother-in-law suites." His phone kept buzzing as I left. I imagined Evelyn's fury when she learned her perfect plan was unraveling. The thought should have given me satisfaction, but all I felt was a hollow ache where trust used to live. Sarah answered on the first ring. "What's wrong? Remember when you said I needed to set boundaries?" I stepped into the elevator, watching the doors close on my married life. "I think I just burned them all down instead." "Good," she said firmly. "Now let's build some new ones, starting with that spare room I just cleaned out." As the elevator descended, I thought about my father's offer from this morning, the executive position still open in his Singapore office. Adam had made his choice. Maybe it was time I made mine. 3 days at Sarah's apartment had given me enough clarity to return home and pack properly. I hadn't expected to find Evelyn already there, sitting at my kitchen table like she owned it. Adam stood by the window, his posture screaming defeat. "Lauren, darling." Evelyn's smile was razor sharp. "We've been waiting for you." My house keys clattered against the counter. "How did you get in?" "I gave her a key," Adam said quietly. "For emergencies." Of course he had. I moved toward our bedroom, but Evelyn's voice stopped me. "We need to talk about your behavior." My behavior. Going through Adam's private communications, making accusations, running away to that friend of yours. She clicked her tongue. It's not healthy, dear. I looked at Adam, waiting for him to defend me. He stared at the floor. I've spoken with Dr. Richards, Evelyn continued. He's an excellent family therapist. Your father-in-law struggled with anxiety too, you know, before he passed. Sometimes we don't realize how our fears affect our judgment. The pieces click together. You're trying to make me sound unstable. We're trying to help you, dear. Adams told me how emotional you've been lately. The paranoia about our housing discussions, the accusations of conspiracy. I turned to Adam. Is that what you've been telling her? He finally met my eyes. Mom's worried about you. We both are. Worried enough to give her a key without telling me, to discuss my mental health behind my back? See, Evelyn gestured toward me. This defensive behavior, these persecution delusions. Get out. My voice was steel. Lauren, both of you, get out of my house. Evelyn stood clutching her designer handbag like a shield. Adam, darling, perhaps we should... No. I pulled out my phone. Either you leave now, or I call the police and report you for breaking and entering. I have a key, Evelyn said smugly, given to you without the knowledge or consent of one of the legal residents. Try explaining that to the officers. Adam stepped forward. Lauren, you're overreacting. Am I? Because from where I'm standing, my husband gave his mother unauthorized access to our home and then conspired with her to make me sound mentally unstable. What's next? Having me committed so you can move her in while I'm gone. The flash of guilt across their faces stopped my heart. Oh my God. I backed away from them. You actually considered it. Not like that, Adam protested. Mom just mentioned that if you needed help. If you don't leave right now, I said, my finger hovering over the emergency dial. I'm calling both the police and my father's lawyers. Your choice. Evelyn gathered her dignity around her like a cloak. We're trying to help you, dear. When you're thinking more clearly. Now, they left. Evelyn first. Adam lingering in the doorway. Lauren, please! I slammed the door in his face and doubled over, fighting for breath. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Everything okay? You've been gone a while? With shaking fingers, I replied, Need you to come over. Bring boxes. Lots of them. Then I called my father. Lauren? He answered on the first ring. I was just about to call you about that Singapore position. Dad. My voice cracked. Remember when you said I could always come home if I needed to? A pause. Then, I'll send the car. Pack what you need for now. We'll handle the rest later. I looked around the apartment, my home for 3 years, now tainted by betrayal. On the kitchen table, Evelyn had left a business card. Dr. Richards, family counselling. I flipped it over. She'd written on the back, For your own good, dear. My phone buzzed again. Adam, please come home. We can talk about this. I typed back, You're right. I am emotional. Emotional enough to make sure everyone knows exactly what you and your mother planned. Starting with your boss. Then I blocked his number and started packing. Some things didn't need family therapy to fix. Some things just needed a clean break and a one-way ticket to Singapore. Michael cornered me in the office parking garage 3 days after I'd moved into my father's guest house. Lauren, wait, please. I kept walking, but he matched my stride. Whatever Adam told you. He didn't send me. Michael stepped in front of my car door. But I know what they were planning. The intervention, the therapy, all of it. My hand tightened around my keys and move. You need to know something. Evelyn's been talking to Human Resources. She's building a case about your mental state affecting your work performance. The world tilted sideways. What? She's friends with Janet in HR. They're documenting every time you've been late, every meeting you've missed, trying to establish a pattern of erratic behavior. I thought of the times I'd rushed to work after Evelyn's surprise visits, the meetings I'd rescheduled while dealing with Adam's deceptions. How long have you known? I overheard them last week at Adam's birthday dinner, the one you missed because you were being difficult. He made air quotes, his face grim. That's when I realized how far this had gone. And you're telling me this now because? because I saw the paperwork on Janet's desk this morning. They're building grounds for a psychiatric evaluation. Adam's already signed something. My stomach lurched. I fumbled with my phone, pulling up my father's number. Don't! Michael grabbed my wrist. They're watching your communications with your father. Any reaction plays into their narrative of you being unstable. I jerked away from him. Why should I trust you? Because I've known Adam since college and I've never seen him like this. Evelyn's got him convinced she's protecting you from yourself. He actually believes it. My phone buzzed. A text from Adam. Can we talk? Mom's worried about your relationship with your father, says it might not be healthy. Another buzz. Evelyn. Darling, Dr. Richards has an opening tomorrow. Adam and I will pick you up. Delete those, Michael said quietly. Delete everything. Get a new phone, new email. They're documenting everything. I stared at the messages, seeing them with new eyes. Every response could be twisted, every reaction used against me. Why are you helping me? Because I watched Evelyn do this to Adam's father. The concerns about his mental health, the documented episodes, the family therapy that turned into residential treatment. By the time he died, she had control of everything. Cold clarity washed over me. She's not getting control of me. No, Michael agreed. But you need to be smart about this. I have copies of emails between Evelyn and Janet. Text messages about their plans. Adam doesn't know I have them. Evidence, I breathed. Enough to take to the board. But you need to wait. Let them think they're winning. The moment they feel threatened, they'll accelerate their plans. I met his eyes. Why didn't Adam ever tell me about his father? Because he doesn't remember it the way it really happened. Evelyn's very good at rewriting history. My phone buzzed again, Sarah. Emergency, Adam just showed up at my place looking for you. Evelyn's with him. They're talking about some intervention. Go, Michael said. I'll handle them here, but Lauren? He handed me a USB drive. Be careful who you trust. Even your father's company isn't safe until we expose this. I took the drive, feeling its weight like a lifeline. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The worst is coming. Are you ready for that? I thought of Adam's betrayal, of Evelyn's schemes, of the life they'd tried to steal from me. They want to paint me as unstable? Fine. Let's show them what real instability looks like. Michael's smile was grim. Now you're thinking like someone who wants to win instead of just survive. I got in my car, already planning my next move. Evelyn thought she was playing chess, but she'd forgotten one crucial detail. In my father's company, I'd learned to play the long game too. And I had nothing left to lose. Time to show them exactly who they were dealing with. The board meeting was supposed to be my moment of triumph. Instead, I stood frozen as Evelyn walked in beside my father, both of them wearing matching expressions of concern. Lauren, Dad said softly, sit down, sweetheart. The USB drive felt heavy in my pocket. Michael's evidence, all the carefully gathered proof of Evelyn's manipulation, suddenly seemed childish. Amateur. Because there she sat, perfectly composed, while Janet from HR distributed thick folders to each board member. As you can see, Evelyn began, her voice dripping with maternal concern, the pattern of erratic behaviour has escalated significantly. I looked at my father. Dad, let them finish, Lauren. His eyes were tired, disappointed. Janet clicked through a PowerPoint presentation, screenshots of my texts to Adam, emails to Sarah about Evelyn's schemes, my browser history researching gaslighting and psychological manipulation. All of it twisted, reframed, transformed into evidence of paranoid delusions. The stress of her position, combined with these conspiracy theories about her mother-in-law, Janet paused meaningfully. We're concerned about liability. This is insane. I pulled out the USB drive. I have proof. Of what, dear? Evelyn's smile was gentle, practiced. That I wanted to help my family stay close? That I worried about you working too hard, pushing yourself too far? You manipulated Adam, just like you did to his father. Lauren. Dad's sharp tone cut through the room. That's enough. I looked around the table at faces I'd known for years, people who'd watched me grow up in this company, all of them carefully avoiding my eyes. "We've spoken with Dr. Richards," Evelyn continued. "He's recommended immediate stress leave, followed by a comprehensive evaluation." The pieces clicked together. "You're forcing me out." "We're helping you," Dad said. "Before you do something you can't take back." I laughed, the sound brittle, like expose how Evelyn manipulated her way into controlling her husband's medical decisions, like revealing how she's doing the same thing to Adam. "You see?" Evelyn's voice trembled perfectly. "These paranoid accusations, these conspiracy theories. Tom, it's exactly what we discussed." Dad nodded slowly. "Lauren, either you take voluntary leave and get help, or the board will have to consider more permanent solutions." "You believe her?" I stared at my father, this man who'd taught me everything I knew about business, about standing my ground. "After everything." "I believe you're not well." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "And I believe I failed you by not seeing it sooner." The betrayal hit like a physical blow. I looked at Michael's empty chair, understanding too late. He'd never intended to help me. This had all been part of their plan, letting me think I had evidence, letting me walk into this meeting thinking I could win. "Fine." I stood up, my chair scraping loudly. "You want me gone? I'm gone." "Lauren, please." Dad reached for me. "Let us help." "Help?" I yanked away from him. "Like you helped Adam's father?" "How did that work out for him, Evelyn?" For just a moment her mask slipped. Something cold and calculating flashed in her eyes. "Security will escort you out," Janet said smoothly. "Your personal items will be forwarded to your father's address." I looked at each face around the table, memorizing them. "You know what the funny thing is? You actually think you've won." "Lauren," Dad started. "I quit." I pulled off my badge, letting it clatter onto the table. "And when this all falls apart, when she turns on you like she turns on everyone, remember this moment. Remember you chose this." Security waited by the door. Professional, efficient, ready to remove the unstable element from the equation. I walked out with my head high, Evelyn's voice drifting after me. Poor dear. At least now she can get the help she needs. In the elevator, I pulled out my phone and sent one text to an unlisted number. "Plan B." Then I deleted everything, just like Michael had suggested. He'd been right about one thing. I needed to be smart about this. Let them think they'd won. Let them think they'd broken me. They had no idea what I was capable of when I had nothing left to lose. The Singapore contract sat unsigned on my hotel desk when Adam's text arrived. "We need to talk. Alone. No lawyers. 3 months of silence. And now he wanted to talk. I checked the time. 2 hours until the board meeting where my father would announce Evelyn's appointment as Chief Operations Officer. 2 hours before they thought they'd won completely. I met Adam at our old coffee shop. He looked terrible, thin, unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes. "You're going to Singapore?" he said. Not a question. Funny how news travels. I stirred my untouched coffee. "Even to people who've blocked my number." "Lauren, please, whatever you're planning." "Planning," I smiled. "I'm doing exactly what everyone wanted. Getting help, starting fresh, leaving the country. Isn't that the story?" His hands shook slightly. "Mum's been going through Dad's old medical records. Fascinating hobby. She's changing things, rewriting history. And now, with your father's company..." He swallowed hard. "I found documents on her computer, plans for restructuring, layoffs. She's going to gut everything once she's COO." "I know." He blinked. "What?" I pulled out my phone, showing him the screen. Emails, bank records, medical documents, all meticulously gathered over 3 months by the private investigator I'd hired. The real reason for my unstable spending that Janet had so carefully documented. "Your mother's not the only one who knows how to play the long game." "But..." "The board meeting starts in an hour, where your mother will accept her promotion in front of the press, major shareholders, and 2 federal investigators who are very interested in fraudulent medical records and embezzlement." The colour drained from his face. You planned this. No, Adam. Your mother planned this. I'm just better at it. I stood up. You should call your lawyer. He grabbed my wrist. Lauren, wait. I'm sorry for everything. I should have... Should have what? Believed me? Protected me? Been an actual husband instead of your mother's puppet? I pulled away. You're right. You should have. But you didn't. What happens now? Now? Your mother gets arrested for fraud. The company discovers mysterious accounting irregularities under her brief supervision. My father's reputation stays intact because he was deceived by a trusted employee. And you, I smiled. You get to explain to the investigators why your signature is on all those falsified documents. You're destroying us. No, I'm giving you exactly what you wanted, a chance to stay close to your mother. I hear prison visiting hours are very regular. His phone buzzed. Evelyn probably wondering why he wasn't at the office yet. Always keeping tabs, always pulling strings. One more thing, I said, reaching for my bag. Remember Dad's job offer? The one you turned down because you didn't want handouts? Turns out your mother convinced you to refuse because she was already embezzling from her last victim. Couldn't risk you getting too close to the books. Lauren, goodbye, Adam. Give your mother my best. I'm sure orange will suit her perfectly. I walked out into the sunlight, checking my watch. 45 minutes until the board meeting. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Investigators in position. Press tipped off. Ready? I thought about Evelyn's smug smile in that last board meeting. About my father's disappointment. About Adam's betrayal. About all the careful, quiet moments of destruction they'd planned for me. Ready, I typed back. Then I added, save me a seat. I want to watch her face when she realizes nice girls don't always finish last. I flagged down a taxi to the office. My Singapore contract could wait another day. First, I had a front row seat to Karma, and I wasn't going to miss a single moment. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just surviving, it's thriving, and making sure everyone who tried to break you has to watch. The Singapore skyline glittered through my office window as I reviewed the morning headlines. Tech CEO's wife sentenced in fraud case. The article featured Evelyn's booking photo, her perfect mask finally cracked, showing the desperation beneath. My phone buzzed. Sarah sending another article. Former executive Adam Chen accepts plea deal. She added, Karma's a better revenge than we ever could be. A knock at my door interrupted my response. Miss Chen, your father's here. I'd kept my married name, a small reminder of everything I'd survived. Send him in. Dad looked older now, the past 6 months etched into new lines around his eyes. He carried a familiar folder, the one Evelyn had used in that last board meeting. The investigators finished their final report, he said, placing it on my desk. Thought you should see it first. I didn't open it. How many years did she get? 8. Adam took a deal for 18 months. He sat heavily. Lauren, if I had known... You believed what she wanted you to believe. We all did for a while. Not you. I had more to lose. I gestured at the Singapore office, my new team visible through the glass walls. Or more to gain, depending on how you look at it. He smiled slightly. The board wants you to come home, take over operations now that... I am home. I met his eyes. Sometimes you have to burn everything down to build something better. Your mother used to say something similar. He touched the folder. There's something else. About Adam's father. I know. At his surprised look, I continued. I've had access to all the evidence for months, Dad. Everything Evelyn did, everyone she hurt. That's why I made sure the investigators found it all. You could have exposed her immediately. Why wait? Because quick revenge is just violence. But patience, I smiled. Patience is justice. My phone buzzed again, Michael this time. After his betrayal, I'd kept his number only to track his movements. His message was simple. You won. Completely. I should have picked the right side. I deleted it without responding. The Singapore expansion is exceeding projections, Dad said, changing tactics. But the Home Office? has plenty of talented people. I stood, walking to the window, including you. I'm stepping down, Lauren. The board agrees it's time for new leadership. Then find it, but not me. I turned back to him. I built something here, Dad. Something that's mine, not yours or Adam's or Evelyn's. I'm keeping it. He nodded slowly, understanding finally reaching his eyes. You never needed revenge. You needed freedom. Maybe they're the same thing sometimes. Another knock. My assistant with afternoon meetings waiting. Dad stood straightening his tie. Have dinner before I fly back? Next time, I said. I have plans tonight. After he left, I opened my personal email. The message I'd been waiting for had arrived. Confirmation of Adam's father's exhumed autopsy results. One last piece of evidence that would ensure Evelyn's 8 years became 15. I closed the email without forwarding it to the investigators. Some weapons you keep in reserve just in case. Some debts stay on the books, gathering interest. My phone buzzed one final time, a text from an unknown number. I underestimated you. E. I smiled, thinking of Evelyn in her prison cell, finally understanding what real powerlessness felt like. She taught me well in her way. Taught me how to play the long game, how to wait for the perfect moment, how to turn weakness into strength. I deleted her message without responding. Outside my office, my team waited with updates on our latest project. Through the glass, I could see their energy, their drive, their loyalty, earned, not demanded. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something they can't touch, becoming someone they can't control, and letting them watch from the sidelines as you thrive without them. I straightened my jacket and opened my office door. Time to get back to work. After all, success is a dish best served daily, with a side of indifference and a view of the future they'll never share.
The phone rang with an urgency that sliced through the calm of my modest home office. Glancing at the unknown number on the screen, I hesitated but eventually answered. Claire Harmon speaking. Your daughter's wedding is starting. Hurry up and come. A gruff voice blurted out, sending a shiver down my spine. I think you have the wrong number. My daughter Ava is still in college, I replied, my voice steady despite the confusion swirling in my head. No mistake, Claire. It's me, Richard. Richard. The name alone was enough to stir a maelstrom of emotions within me. 15 years had passed since our bitter divorce, since he had callously abandoned Ava and me for his mistress. Now he was calling about a wedding? It had to be some sick joke. Richard, this is nonsense. What are you talking about? Just get here, White Garden Chapel, and hurry, he said, and the line went dead. I stood frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. Ava, who had been studying in the living room, looked up, her eyes filled with concern. Mom, is everything okay? Just an old ghost, nothing to worry about, I said, forcing a smile. But inside, a storm was brewing. As I sat down, memories I had long buried began to resurface. 15 years ago, life was a picture-perfect portrait. A loving husband, a beautiful daughter, a comfortable home. But then Richard tore that portrait to shreds. I had been a part-time librarian back then, content with my quiet life. Richard, on the other hand, was poised to take over his family's lucrative business. We had never struggled financially, but that wasn't enough for him. The late nights, the weekend meetings, the growing distance, they were all signs I had chosen to ignore. Then came the day he coldly announced his affair and his plans to remarry. I've found someone else. We're having a child, he had said without a hint of remorse. The revelation shattered my world. But worse was yet to come. He left, leaving me with nothing but a broken heart and a mountain of questions. How could he? Why didn't I see it coming? The divorce was swift, his wealthy family ensuring he got off without a hitch. I was left to pick up the pieces, to rebuild a life for Ava and me from scratch. The years that followed were a blur of struggle and determination. I worked day and night, slowly climbing my way up from a part-time librarian to the owner of a thriving online bookstore. Ava grew into a bright, strong-willed college student, my pride and joy. We had come so far, yet Richard's call threatened to unravel everything. I was pulled from my thoughts by Ava's voice. Mom, who was that, really? It was your father, I said, the bitterness in my voice surprising even me. Ava's expression hardened. What does he want after all these years? He mentioned a wedding. His, perhaps, but it doesn't matter. We have our own lives now. Ava nodded, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. Richard's abandonment had left a void in her life, one that I had tried desperately to fill. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I couldn't shake the feeling that Richard's call was more than just a cruel reminder of the past. There was something sinister in his tone, something that told me this wasn't the end of it. As night fell and Ava retreated to her room, I sat alone in the living room, the ghosts of the past haunting me. Richard had moved on, had built a life without us. Why reach out now? What game was he playing? I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't let Richard disrupt our lives again. We had come too far to be dragged back into his twisted world. Ava and I, we were survivors, and we would face whatever came our way, together. The phone rang again, jolting me from my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. It was Richard. Taking a deep breath, I answered, ready to confront the past. "What do you want, Richard?" "Ah, Claire, finally ready to listen." Richard's voice oozed through the phone with a patronizing tone. "I'm not here for games, Richard. What do you want?" I replied, my grip tightening around the phone. "It's simple. I need you at the White Garden Chapel. It's for our daughter's wedding." "Our daughter?" "Ava is in college, Richard. What are you playing at?" There was a pause, and then a chuckle. "Not Ava, my other daughter. You know, the one I had with her." The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. He had a daughter, almost Ava's age, and he dared to drag me into this farce. "You must be out of your mind if you think I'll play along with your twisted fantasies," I spat out. "Come on, Claire. I thought you'd enjoy the chance to show how well you've done without me. Plus, it'll be good for Ava to see what she missed out on." His words stung, but I refused to let him see my pain. "Ava hasn't missed out on anything, Richard. She's better off without a father like you." The line went silent for a moment before Richard's voice came back, colder this time. "You'll regret this, Claire. I always get what I want, one way or another." The call ended abruptly, leaving me in a state of shock and anger. How dare he? After all these years, he still had the audacity to try and manipulate me. I couldn't let this go. Not this time. It was clear that Richard hadn't changed, and now he was dragging another innocent child into his web of lies. I had to protect Ava and myself from his vindictive games. The next day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I called an old friend who had become a private investigator. "Tom, I need a favor. Can you find out everything about Richard's other daughter? I need to know what he's planning." Tom agreed without hesitation, understanding the urgency in my voice. Meanwhile, Ava, sensing something was amiss, confronted me. "Mom, what's going on? Why are you so worried all of a sudden?" I hesitated, not wanting to involve her in Richard's mess, but she deserved the truth. "Ava, your father called yesterday. He claims he's getting his other daughter married and wanted me there." Ava's face contorted with a mix of anger and disbelief. "He's unbelievable. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to find out what he's up to. But I need you to promise me something, Ava. Stay out of this. I don't want you getting hurt." Ava nodded reluctantly, her eyes filled with a fire that reminded me so much of myself at her age. Over the next few days, Tom's investigation unearthed disturbing details. Richard's new family was a facade. His business was failing, and his marriage was on the rocks. The wedding was a desperate attempt to maintain appearances, and he wanted me there to further his own agenda. Armed with this information, I knew I had to act. It was time to confront Richard and end his manipulations once and for all. I decided to go to the White Garden Chapel, not to participate in his charade, but to expose it. As I drove to the chapel, my mind raced with possibilities. What would I say? How would he react? But deep down, I knew it didn't matter. I was doing this for Ava, for myself, and for the innocent daughter Richard had dragged into his deceitful world. I arrived at the chapel, steeling myself for the confrontation. It was time to face Richard and the past he represented. Today, I would finally break free from his shadow and protect my family from his destructive influence. As I stepped into the White Garden Chapel, the lavish decor couldn't mask the underlying tension in the air. Richard stood at the front, his face a mix of surprise and annoyance upon seeing me. "Claire, you actually came. How unexpected," he sneered. "I'm not here for your games, Richard. I know about your failing business and sham of a marriage. What are you really up to?" His smirk faltered, replaced by a flash of anger. Always so clever, aren't you? Well, since you're here, why not play along? For old time's sake. I'm not one of your pawns, Richard, and neither is our daughter. What about this other daughter of yours? Does she know about your lies? Richard's facade of control was slipping. You always were too nosy for your own good. Yes, my business is struggling, but this wedding will secure a deal that'll save it. All you need to do is stand there and look pretty. Look pretty? For your business deal? I couldn't hide my disgust. You're using your own daughter's wedding as a business transaction? That's low, even for you. He stepped closer, his voice a menacing whisper. You have no idea what it takes to maintain a lifestyle like mine. You were always too simple to understand. Simple? I've built a life for Ava and me without stooping to deceit and manipulation. You're pathetic, Richard. His eyes narrowed. Watch your mouth, Claire. You're in my world now. Just then, a young woman, presumably Richard's other daughter, approached us. Her expression was a mix of confusion and hurt. Dad, what's going on? Who is she? This is Claire, an old friend. Don't mind her, she was just leaving, Richard said, attempting to regain his composure. No, she's not just leaving, the young woman protested. She looks upset. What did you do, Dad? Richard's mask was finally crumbling. Nothing, it's just business. I looked at the young woman, seeing a reflection of Ava in her. I'm sorry you're caught up in this. Your father's not the man you think he is. Enough, Claire, Richard barked. Leave now, or I'll make you regret it. I'm not afraid of you, Richard, but I won't stoop to your level. I'm leaving, but not because you told me to. I'm leaving because there's nothing here for me. As I turned to leave, Richard's voice followed me, laced with malice. You'll pay for this, Claire, you and your daughter. Outside, the cool air did little to calm my raging thoughts. Richard's threat lingered in my mind. I knew then that this wasn't over. I had to protect Ava and expose Richard for who he truly was. Driving home, my resolve hardened. Richard had thrown down the gauntlet, and I was ready to pick it up. It was time for his reign of manipulation and deceit to end. For Ava's sake, for my sake, and for the sake of the young woman who deserved a father far better than Richard. Back at home, I relayed the day's events to Ava. Her reaction was a mix of anger and determination. We can't let him get away with this, Mom. He's not just a liar, he's dangerous. I know, Ava, and I have a plan. But it's risky, and I need you to trust me. Ava nodded, her eyes reflecting the fire of resolve. Whatever it takes, Mom. Over the next few days, I pored over Richard's business dealings, thanks to some discreet inquiries by Tom. The picture that emerged was one of desperation and deceit. Richard's company was on the verge of bankruptcy, and his personal life was no better. His second marriage was crumbling, just like his first. Armed with this information, I reached out to Richard's business partners, carefully planting seeds of doubt about his stability and trustworthiness. It was a subtle campaign, but effective. Soon, whispers of Richard's impending downfall began to circulate in his social circles. Meanwhile, Ava took to social media, skillfully crafting posts that highlighted Richard's unethical practices, being careful not to mention him directly. It wasn't long before the posts went viral, adding to the growing storm around Richard. The final blow came when I anonymously tipped off a local journalist about Richard's shady dealings. The subsequent article was a damning exposé that sent ripples through the community. As Richard's world began to crumble, he became increasingly erratic. He called me one evening. His voice barely contained fury. "What have you done, Claire? You're ruining me." "I haven't done anything, Richard. You're the architect of your own downfall. You think you're so clever, but you're nothing. I'll destroy you and your precious daughter." "Threats, Richard, really? That's all you have left?" I said, my voice steady despite the chill his words sent down my spine. "You haven't seen the last of me, Claire. I'll make sure you regret this." But his threats were empty, his power waning. The community turned against him, his business partners withdrew their support, and his social standing evaporated. Richard had become a pariah, undone by his own actions. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Richard's company declared bankruptcy, and his wife filed for divorce. He tried to reach out to Ava, perhaps seeking some form of redemption, but she refused to engage with him. "You did it, Mom. You brought him down," Ava said one evening as we sat in our living room, the weight of the past months finally lifting. "We did it, Ava. Together." But even as we celebrated our victory, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. Richard had been a part of my life, once a source of love and happiness. It was a tragic end to a chapter that had started with so much promise. In the quiet aftermath of Richard's downfall, Ava and I found ourselves in a reflective mood. Our living room, once a sanctuary from the chaos of the outside world, now felt too silent, too still. "Mom, do you think we went too far?" Ava asked one evening, her eyes searching mine for answers I wasn't sure I had. I sighed, the weight of her question heavy on my shoulders. "Richard brought this on himself, Ava. We just accelerated the inevitable." "I know, but I can't help feeling guilty. We've essentially ruined a man's life." "He ruined his own life, Ava. We just exposed the truth." I paused, my thoughts drifting. "But I understand what you're feeling. There's no joy in seeing someone's life crumble, even if they deserve it." Ava nodded, her expression somber. "What now, Mom? What do we do with all this emptiness?" "We rebuild, Ava. We fill our lives with new memories, new joys. We've been given a chance to start afresh, free from Richard's shadow." The conversation lingered in the air as we both retreated into our own thoughts. The weeks that followed were a time of healing and reflection. We focused on our business, which had thrived amidst the chaos, and on strengthening our bond, which had been tested but not broken. But just when we thought we could close the chapter on Richard, fate had one more twist in store. A knock on our door one rainy evening revealed a young woman, drenched and shivering. Richard's other daughter, the one he had used as a pawn in his twisted games. "Miss Harmon? I'm sorry to bother you. I'm Elise, Richard's daughter. I didn't know where else to go." Her appearance was a shock, but I couldn't turn her away. "Come in, Elise. You're welcome here." As Elise settled in, wrapped in a warm blanket with a cup of tea in her hands, she shared her story. Richard had abandoned her and her mother, leaving them with nothing but debts and broken promises. "I'm sorry, Elise," Ava said, her voice filled with empathy. "We didn't know about you when we set out to expose your father." Elise shook her head, a tear trailing down her cheek. "No, you did what needed to be done. I'm just lost. I don't know what to do now." "We'll help you, Elise," I said, a resolve settling in my heart. "You're not alone in this. We'll figure this out together." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. We helped Elise settle her father's debts and supported her in starting a new life. It was a time of healing, not just for Elise, but for Ava and me as well. We had extended our family, found a new purpose in our shared experiences. As I watched Ava and Elise laughing together one afternoon, a sense of peace filled me. We had come full circle, from victims of Richard's deceit to architects of our own destiny. Our lives were once again our own, richer and fuller for the trials we had endured. With Elise now part of our lives, our home buzzed with a new energy. It was refreshing, yet it came with its own set of challenges. Elise, carrying the scars of her father's neglect, often found herself grappling with complex emotions. One evening, as we gathered in the living room, Elise's facade of strength crumbled. "How do you do it?" she asked, her voice quivering. "How do you move past the anger, the betrayal?" Ava reached out, taking Elise's hand in hers. "It's not easy, and it doesn't happen overnight. For years I hated my father for abandoning us, but eventually I realized that hate was only holding me back. I want to move on, but I feel so lost," Elise confessed, tears brimming in her eyes. "You're not alone, Elise," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You're part of this family now. We'll navigate this journey together." Our conversation that night was a turning point. It brought us closer, creating a bond forged from shared pain and mutual understanding. In the weeks that followed, we supported each other in ways big and small. Ava and Elise grew particularly close, finding solace in their shared experiences as daughters of the same flawed man. But just when we thought we had left the worst behind, Richard reappeared, a shadow from the past we thought we had escaped. He showed up at our doorstep one day, unannounced and unwanted. "Richard, what are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice cold. I need help," he stammered, a shadow of his former self. "I've lost everything. I have nowhere else to go." His appearance was pitiful, but I felt no sympathy. "You made your bed, Richard. Now you have to lie in it." "Please, Claire. I've changed. I realize now what I've done to you, to Ava, to Elise. I want to make amends." Elise stepped forward, her expression one of disbelief. "Make amends? After everything you've done? You abandoned us. Richard's eyes darted between us, desperation etched on his face. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm your father. Doesn't that count for something? No, Richard. Being a father is more than just a title. It's about being there, about love and support. You've done none of that, I said firmly. Ava stood beside me, her stance resolute. You need to leave, Richard. There's nothing for you here. Defeated, Richard turned and walked away, his figure disappearing into the fading light of the day. Watching him go, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that he was finally out of our lives, and sadness for the man he could have been, the father he should have been. That night, we sat together, a family united not by blood, but by our shared experiences and newfound love for each other. We talked about the future, about the possibilities that lay ahead. It was a future we would face together, stronger and more resilient than ever. In the weeks following Richard's departure, a sense of calm settled over our household. Ava, Elise, and I found comfort in our routine, each day bringing us closer and healing old wounds. We were a family, not by blood, but by choice, bound by our resilience and shared experiences. One evening, as we gathered for dinner, Elise broached a subject we had all been avoiding. I've been thinking about my dad, she said hesitantly. I know he's done terrible things, but he's still my father. I feel like I should do something, try to help him somehow. Ava reached across the table, squeezing Elise's hand. I understand how you feel, Elise, but remember, we can't fix him. He has to want to change, and right now, he doesn't. I know, Elise sighed. It's just hard to let go. It is, I agreed, but sometimes letting go is the only way to move forward. We've all been hurt by Richard, but we can't let him define our lives. The conversation lingered in the air, a reminder of the complex emotions we all harbored, yet it was also a testament to our strength and our ability to face difficult truths. In the days that followed, we focused on building our future. Ava excelled in her studies, her dreams of becoming a writer now within reach. Elise, with our support, enrolled in community college, determined to carve her own path. As for me, the bookstore continued to thrive, a symbol of my journey from a broken-hearted wife to a successful businesswoman and mother. But more than that, it was a place where Ava, Elise, and I could share our love for stories and dreams. One sunny afternoon, as we rearranged the bookstore, Ava looked up from a stack of books, a thoughtful expression on her face. Mom, Elise, I've been thinking. We've all been through so much, and we've come out stronger. What if we share our story? Write a book about it. Elise's eyes lit up. That's a great idea, Ava. Our story could inspire others who are going through tough times. I nodded, feeling a surge of pride. I think it's a wonderful idea. Let's do it. Let's tell our story, our way. And so we began. Nights were spent around the kitchen table, sharing memories, laughter, and tears as we penned our story. It was a cathartic experience, one that brought us even closer. Months later, as I held the first copy of our book, I felt a sense of accomplishment and closure. We had turned our pain into something beautiful, something that could potentially help others. As we prepared for the book launch, I looked at Ava and Elise, my heart full of love and gratitude. We had weathered the storm, and now we were ready to embrace the sunshine. Our story doesn't end here, I said, smiling at them. This is just the beginning, a new chapter in our lives. Ava and Elise smiled back, their eyes shining with hope and excitement for the future. Together, we stepped out into the world, ready to share our story and start a new journey, a journey filled with promise, love, and the unbreakable bond of a family forged in fire and tempered by time.